Okay, we need to talk about something. We're going to tackle one of the most secret and, frankly, agonizing themes within obsessive-compulsive disorder. It's a topic that forces people to suffer in silence, feeling trapped and utterly convinced that they're a monster. If that sounds familiar, I need you to listen. You are not alone, and there is a clear, clinical reason for everything you're experiencing.
Before we go any further, I want this message to be absolutely crystal clear. Let's just put it right here, right at the start. If you are horrified, disgusted, and terrified by these thoughts, that horror you feel, that's the key. That is the single most important piece of evidence separating a disorder from a true desire. Please hold on to that as we go through this.
So, why? Why on earth does your own mind produce the one thought you find the most repulsive? Well, it's because of a concept that's absolutely central to OCD, called ego-dystonic thoughts. These are intrusive thoughts, images, or urges that are the total, complete opposite of who you are, of your real values, your beliefs, your wishes. They feel alien, they feel invasive, and they feel deeply, deeply wrong to you.
This right here draws a razor-sharp line in the sand. Look, on the left, that's the experience of OCD. The thoughts are unwanted, and they cause this immense guilt and fear. That's ego-dystonic. It's a direct attack on your values. On the right, you have the polar opposite, ego-syntonic thoughts, which actually line up with desire and don't have that same soul-crushing distress. So the biggest takeaway here, and I really want you to hear this, is that your suffering, your pain, that is the evidence. It's what separates the disorder from the desire. It is a symptom, not a flaw in your character.
This just says it all, doesn't it? These are not some secret desires bubbling up from your subconscious, no way. They are mental spam. They are glitches in the system. They feel so huge and so significant because they attack the very thing you value most, which is protecting children. But their content has zero bearing on who you actually are.
All right, now we have to address what is often the most confusing and shame-inducing part of POCD. We're talking about the physical sensations. So many people feel completely betrayed by their own bodies, which of course makes the thoughts feel terrifyingly real.
This is the question. This is what haunts people. You have a repulsive thought, you feel totally disgusted, and yet your body responds. Maybe it's a twitch, a tingling, or a feeling of fullness in the groin. And your brain just screams, "See? You liked it. You're a monster." But this is a profound misunderstanding of how your body and your anxiety work together.
There's actually a clinical term for this. It's called arousal non-concordance, and it's a very well-documented thing where your body's physical reaction doesn't line up with how you actually feel inside. It happens in a lot of different situations, but in OCD, it just becomes another piece of false evidence to obsess over. It is not proof of desire. It is proof of a hyper-anxious brain fixating on one specific part of the body. So let's break down exactly how this false alarm works. First, the intrusive thought hits you. Bam! Instantly, your brain's smoke detector, the amygdala, starts blaring. It screams, "Threat!" and floods your whole system with anxiety. Now, because you're so terrified of what these thoughts might mean sexually, you become hyper-aware of your groin, right? You're constantly monitoring it for any little sensation. And this intense focus automatically directs blood flow to that area, just like focusing on your hand can make it feel warm. That physical sensation is then misinterpreted as arousal, which of course creates even more anxiety, and the whole vicious cycle just feeds itself. It's a feedback loop of fear, not a feedback loop of desire.
And this leads us right to the engine that keeps OCD running, that desperate, all-consuming need to be 100% certain. You feel like you have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are not a monster, but that quest for certainty, it's a trap.
Do any of these look familiar? I bet they do. These are compulsions. They're rituals that you do to try and get rid of the doubt and the anxiety. You might test yourself by looking at things. You might avoid your own niece or nephew, or you might spend hours and hours scanning your memories for evidence. These are not the actions of a predator. These are the desperate actions of a terrified person trying to shut down a threat that isn't even real.
And this is the cruel paradox of OCD. Every single time you do one of those compulsions, every time you check or avoid or ask for reassurance, you might get a tiny little moment of relief. But what you're actually doing is teaching your brain that the initial thought was, in fact, a real danger that needed to be neutralized. You are literally strengthening the obsession, making it more likely to come back and way more powerful when it does.
So if trying to push the thoughts away just makes them stronger, what's the answer? Well, the answer is to stop fighting and to start learning to accept the presence of the thoughts without giving them any power. There is a way out of this,
and it's a well-established, evidence-based strategy.
The most effective treatment we have for OCD, the one with the most scientific backing, is called exposure and response prevention, or ERP for short. This isn't just talk therapy, it's a very specific, targeted kind of behavioral therapy that is designed to break the OCD cycle right at its core.
So what does ERP actually mean? It means you systematically and safely face the thoughts and situations you're afraid of. That's the exposure part. And, crucially, you resist the urge to do any of your compulsions. That's the response prevention. Now, the goal is not to start liking the thoughts. Absolutely not. The goal is to teach your brain that you can handle the anxiety and the uncertainty, and that nothing terrible actually happens. And over time, those alarm bells just stop ringing so loudly.
So this is what it might look like in real life. It is not about doing something dangerous or reckless. It's a gradual, controlled process that you build with a therapist. You might start with something that causes just a little bit of anxiety, like reading a word, and you slowly work your way up this courage ladder at your own pace. You learn, step by step, that you can live your life alongside these thoughts without letting them run the show. And this brings us to the most important part of all of this, getting your identity back. OCD might feel like it has completely taken over, but you can learn to separate who you are from the noise of this disorder.
You know, OCD is a master storyteller. It takes this tiny, imaginary what-if and it spins it into this vivid, terrifying story that feels completely real. There's a name for this reasoning error. It's called inferential confusion. The therapy we've been talking about helps you learn to stop living inside that story and come back to the real world, to what is actually happening right here and right now.
Please, repeat this to yourself. Say it over and over until you start to believe it. Feelings are not facts. That overwhelming guilt, that spike of anxiety, those confusing physical sensations, they feel like solid evidence, but they are not facts. They are just false signals coming from an overactive threat system. They are symptoms, that's it. Remember this, our brains are wired to treat things that are repetitive and emotional as important, but with OCD, that's a bug in the system. The reason these thoughts keep coming back is not because they're true or meaningful, it's because they're stuck. Their stickiness is the symptom, not their content.
And this is the final, most important truth. You are not the random, intrusive noise that your brain generates. You are the person who is horrified by that noise. You are the person who goes to incredible lengths to make sure no harm ever comes to a child. You are defined by your values and your choices, not by the spam that shows up in your mental inbox. Your actions, not your intrusive thoughts, are what truly define who you are.